Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today we're at Mount Shasta and we're going to hike from Bunny Flat up Mount Shasta to a base camp called 50-50. It's not all the way to the summit, but it's a very challenging hike nonetheless. We wake up early and my hiking partner for today is my friend Kat, who's visiting from Belgium. She's a world-class cyclist, but not a bad hiker either. So we cruise to Bunny Flat and we check out the regulations, mess around with the tree with a hole in it and take a couple of selfies, and then we continue on up the trail. The mood is quite jovial and the hike is easy at the beginning. Our first destination is the Stone Sierra Club cabin called Horse Camp, which is about 1.7 miles in. And as it turns out, the trail is pretty nice up until that point, although there are some steep sections. Bunny Camp sits at an elevation of 6,900 feet, while the Horse Camp Stone Cabin is at 8,000 feet. So in 1.7 miles, you gain about 1,100 feet. And for those looking for a more mild hike, the Horse Camp is probably as far as you need to go, and it's definitely a worthwhile hike if that's all you do. The Sierra Club Horse Camp Hut is often referred to as the Shasta Alpine Hut, and the view from there is considered one of the most iconic views you could imagine. The hut has a long and colorful history, and you won't be able to avoid spending a lot of time there, just going in and reading all the plaques and the newspaper clippings and everything they have to offer there. It's really an incredible place, and you can see the benches out front where people can gather in good weather. The Alpine Lodge is very well constructed, and it was finished in 1922, and out in front is a plaque that was later installed in 1927, which commemorates the Alpine Lodge. Once inside the lodge, you'll find it's fairly Spartan, but there is a ton of information in there. So do plan to spend some time up there and read all the information on the walls. There's old newspaper articles and a lot of information about Mount Shasta and the history of the place. The fireplace isn't operational right now, it has a lock on it, and you can't stay there, but you certainly can enjoy it during the daytime, and it's a wonderful place to visit and just check out all the articles. We spent a lot of time there reading all the information. Of all the information found on the walls of the Alpine Hut at Mount Shasta, the one I found most interesting was this woman who's sitting side saddle and rode a horse to the summit of Mount Shasta in 1904. It's the only time a horse has made it to the summit, and it's mind-boggling that it could even be done. So kudos to her. Right outside the cabin, you'll find this fresh drinking water, which is piped in from a nearby spring. Of course, there's signs telling people to keep it clean and available for those to use for drinking water. It's really a magical spot, and the birds seem to enjoy it quite a bit as well. So there's a lot of wildlife visitors that come to use the water. Then it's time to leave the cabin and we head up what's called Olberman's Causeway, which is sort of a rocky path that leaves the cabin and heads up a little bit before the terrain starts to get a lot steeper and more technical. As we get up higher, the trees become thinner and the views of Mount Shasta are absolutely stunning. Kat turns around and points out the jagged peaks, which were part of the Castle Lakes hike that we did the day before.
Those are the jaggedy mountains there, so I think it's that peak right here. See the tree here and the branch out there.
Looking back down the hill here, you get another nice view of Olberman's Causeway. And here's Kat sporting a little skin and stopping to photograph some beautiful wildflowers that we found along the way while enjoying that beautiful, gorgeous view of the summit. After a while, the trail kind of disappears and it's more or less a use trail. You can still find your way, but it's very steep, and while I wouldn't call it terribly technical, it's pretty arduous, and it's all I could do to try to keep up with Kat, who is setting a kind of a vicious pace up here. As we make our way up this rocky terrain in late season when the snow is gone, it makes you realize why people prefer to do this in the spring when there's still snow. Because travel over this rough rocky terrain is actually easier when snow is present. But fortunately, our travels are only going to take us to 50-50 Camp today, unlike this guy we saw coming down. He actually left 5 hours before us in his summit bid, but he wisely turned around when he got to the top and realized how sketchy it was because of the ice. You know, sometimes it's just about the journey and not whether or not you make the summit. He seemed to be having a great hike. The terrain on Mount Shasta is actually quite sketchy, so unless you're a very experienced mountaineer, probably best that you take a guided tour if you plan to visit the summit. It's just much safer that way. However, if you're traveling there in late season and you only plan to make it to Horse Camp, 50-50, or even Helen Lake, it's probably fine to go without a guide. On our trip, the weather was perfect, and we experienced some amazing views along the way. The views looking back toward the southwest where we hiked the day before at Castle Lake were always spectacular. Then we finally arrived at the 50-50 area, and the colorful rocks were amazing. They're all volcanic, and they range in colors from the grays to reds to yellows. They're absolutely beautiful. Here the terrain flattens out for a bit, and you can see why this area is used as a base camp for those trying to reach the summit. It's basically a flat area, and although it's quite rocky, people in the past have moved the rocks around to create specific camping areas. So this 50-50 area, along with the slightly higher Helen Lake, are places where people create base camps so that they can reach the summit and make a reasonable day out of it versus hiking from the bottom. But the campsites are beautiful, and naturally Kat's action figure Smurf was always willing to take a pose. The volcanic rock on Mount Shasta was extremely lightweight, and it was quite easy to toss it around.
Hey Paul, are you doing some weightlifting here on top of Mount Shasta? Wow, that's pretty amazing. Maybe you can juggle with two now.
At this point, we decided there was no need to push it and try to extend our hike up to Helen Lake. So we just enjoyed the 50-50 area and then turned around and headed back down the hill. The views are unbelievable up here, all the way up and all the way down. And it was just a wonderful hike. Naturally, we stopped again at the Alpine Hut to check it out. And then we headed down the road in an attempt to find a place to camp. We searched around for a bit and found a place to camp at Lake Shasta. And the place where we camped is actually underwater during the summer. But the water was low and there was this really cool sight. And we were camped under a railroad bridge, so we watched the trains go by in the afternoon and the evening. And then we took a walk down what is now a boat ramp, but was formerly the road before the lake was dammed. But it was just a beautiful night there. So thanks for coming along on this adventure, and I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, thanks for watching.